This video is going to be about recycling and assumptions people have about it, and that depending on whether or not you're passionate about the subject, you're an idiot. People who are passionate about a subject will ignore anything that they don't want to hear, get very angry, and ultimately resort to actual violence. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is. It could be about what's the best brand of transistor to make an amplifier out of. You can actually get a bloody violent beating out of making a statement on it. Gatorade PET bottles. PET number 1, polyethylene terephthalate plastic container. It's the main body of it. The plastic cap is a type number 5 polypropylene. Reaching poorly for my... Okay. Now, what are we talking about here? How many different things are in this that are recyclable, bad for the environment, etc.? There's a third layer. This is an outer wrap that's called in the industry banding, usually. Banding or shrink wrap material. This case is a sleeve made from PVC, PET, or any other plastic that can be made to where it reacts to heat by changing diameter. And there are many of them. A pre-cut tubing with printed material on it, like marketing, informational purposes, advertising, whatever. What they do is they make it a flat sheet, fold it, and then thermally weld it together at the edge, and then they slip it over the bottle and hit it with a heat shrink gun or just in an oven, and it shrinks down. Up to that point, the plastic bottle is completely clear. It doesn't have any particular flavor or even brand on it. This is going to start off being a thermoplastic. Like I said, it's a Gatorade PET 1. That'll be shaped like a really tall, skinny flask or test tube. They call them baby test tubes or baby soda bottle test tubes. When you buy them, you can buy them not blown up. They inflate it with air and it fits into a mold and it makes the shape. The shape is done so it's very, very hard to compress. It's very rigid. Some bottles are more rigid than others, but this surface is hard to print on, so the banding thing, I won't whip it out, gets put onto it because it can have whatever patterns on it, and that pattern is only loaded up on the line that's filling it with lemon flavor, whatever. The lid, it's the orange lid, orange cap. Completely see-through plastic like this and specific colors like red, green, blue, orange, whatever, are desirable, more desirable than the blank, untinted material. Untinted or white is generic stuff. Untinted white that can be made see-through is more expensive, maybe. The cap, when you take it off, however, leaves this piece on. That causes this to be a contaminated item when it's recycled by a little bit of that other material. Instead of PET, it has polypropylene. And the banding adds more contamination. Separating them makes it to where you suddenly have a very recyclable body, a very recyclable lid, especially if you remove that little band, and then even the shrink wrap can be reused to make electrical insulation or whatever. It's a valuable product for recycling. Now, you might be wondering, how much is it worth? Well, we're going to use an example that most of you know about and a lot of you think is a worse or better option, but really there's only two plastics here that are the main components that can be recycled. This is the lid for a coffee cup. You notice how it does not have a really shiny surface to it. This is made out of the same kind of material technically as styrofoam. This is a polystyrene lid. This is called number 6 PS for polystyrene. It weighs 2 grams. To make 1 metric ton worth $1,500, you need 500,000 of them or something like that. Now, what if you collect these like China used to do and India used to do? Kind of a neat visual effect. And that neither of them are taking this stuff anymore. In India specifically, they would take these, put them in a heater, and then run air to press them flat down so they would form a big disc. Then they would be allowed to cool rapidly, put those into a stack, and then heat them up again, and then apply pressure with a plunger, and also by evacuating the cylinder, converting it into a really large diameter lump and then press it through an extrusion nozzle to make whatever they wanted. And at $1,500 value, they could convert it into, through string, into monofilament for a 3D printer, or run it through lots of extruders like that and chop them off and make little beads or pellets for it to be put into another extruder someplace else, much more efficiently, and make anything. Very recyclable. You pop it off, throw it in the container. All anybody has to do to sort them, or even a computer, is see, oh, they're the same size, same mass, weight, density, color, and sort them that way. And sorting them by color makes it much more valuable because now they already have the dye coloring in them. Just like the see-through versus white versus the orange cap, this is value added. It removes a bunch of steps that would be taken up by extracting it from oil barrels. Now we get to this thing. We look inside, if I can get the angle right, and we should see that seam right there. Now it's dark colored because only the seam is actually paper. It's not really a paper cup. It's a high temperature waterproofed container. Now that means this is made out of paper and that there's a seam right here that goes along the length of it. And it's about 1/4 inch wide if you take the inner and outer seam edges. So you'd have to cut that out. You'd have to cut off the top. It's a ring. It's not really a seam, but you should cut it off. And you cut off this band down here, and you'd end up with a little round disc and a flat sheet that's kind of, a rainbow curve to it. And how would you recycle it? Well, it's paper. It can be biodegraded. No. They specifically make these able to be stored for a long time, so it has antimicrobial properties. Not something that will cause harm with you and me, but it makes it to where it won't decay, just like a book won't. And the plastic lining makes virtually, but not all of the contact with the coffee or with whatever else you put in there. So they don't really have to worry about what's in the paper. They can chemically strip off what's in it, and it is lined, if you're not aware of it, with a plastic resin, polyethylene, whatever, and this lines paper coffee cups. Now, at 2 grams for the lid, and this being whatever gram weight it is, the paper is worth whatever it is per ton scrap material. But if they strip off the plastic, they can use a solvent where they can remove it with a solvent and then evaporate it by just getting it warm. And it'll peel off the plastic lining, and you'll still have the plastic lining material over here that you can eventually collect after thousands of these to get a couple of 100 pounds of it. And you can recycle it and reuse it. The paper is almost infinitely recyclable. In a real way, not really, but it is almost, depending on what you want to use it for. Now, there's a story that actually turns out to be true, that Starbucks decided to go straw-free and ended up making a lid for some reason that was much more complicated than this one that includes a little drinking spout. I mean, it doesn't have to be very complicated. This is like Vanta Black. You can't see anything. I'll stop doing that. But anyway, integrating not just a spout, but something more complicated, they ended up making it use more plastic to make a lid than just having a thin plastic lid and a straw. This is mostly for cold drinks, and they used a plastic straw. Cold drinks don't require a plastic straw. They can use a paper straw that's waxed. But which one's better for the environment? Plastics are more recyclable than paper. I'm not kidding. They are better for the environment. But when paper gets ground up and ends up in landfill, just like glass, and turns into micro paper or micro glass, it's just sawdust and sand at that point. When plastic grinds up and becomes microplastics, it becomes part of your fish. And not just that they've eaten it. It'll wiggle its way through as a biologically inert material, like a sliver, through the lining of the abdomen and stomach, even in a human, and end up in the body. The body will then try to deal with it, move it around a bit, and eventually get stuck into the muscle tissue. So if you're eating fish, you may be caramelizing a piece of plastic inside of the fish. Steak has been found in some cases from cattle to contain microplastics. Vegetables grown in gardens that are grown on any kind of soil that hasn't been thoroughly checked for this, the carrots and other plants will start integrating plastic bits in them because the tissue of the plant root, the carrot body, won't reject it. So you will find baby carrots sometimes have bits of plastic in it. To make a 100% certified organic farm that doesn't have pesticides, some of them are switching over to baking out the plastics or burning out the plastics in 1 cubic yard or 1 cubic meter chunks to get rid of the microplastics in the ground so it doesn't get into the vegetables. And or digging up the entire thing, treating the landfill like a mining operation, getting all the plastics out because it's probably on a landfill, and starting over and trying to sift it down. Now, aside from money value and intelligence and insanity here, is recycling communist or capitalist or whatever? Okay, we're going to go into what comes out of petroleum. Petroleum-based plastics require thousands of barrels of oil every single year. Only thousands? Okay. Crude oil, when you refine it by cracking, this is not even doing it sophisticated. You get about 45% of the volume turns into gasoline. Or mass. I don't know how they're measuring it. 10% ends up being diesel. 35% is other, or 45, excuse me. 10%, however, which is part of that other, turns into plastics. They can be used to make a variety of plastics. Not having to dig it out of the ground and having, I mean, literally, there's an orange cap over there. If I get enough of them, I can make my toy flare gun. Means that you eliminate an entire industry that doesn't want to be eliminated, the oil industry. The oil industry is A, notorious for telling the truth and not being absolutely full of shit, or B, literally everybody hates them because they fucking lie all the time. Decide what you wish. What's the complexity of recycling this? Grinding it up because you put them all in the same bundle and turning it into small fibers and bits and pieces, and then compressing it and extruding it again and making pellets, or doing like they do in India, doing it all in one step without grinding it in the first place. How do you recycle the paper? Well, it's biodegradable, not with that plastic layer and not with the treatment it's gotten. It's better to recycle it into books and paper. Chemically stripping the lining off of it is a pain, but not that big of a pain compared to it getting into your food supply. Should you crush them? If you want to make a machine that does these correctly, it drops down, cuts off the base, cuts off the rim, and then cuts off the seam, and takes the part that's easily recycled and only runs it through the part that removes the plastic layer by using a chemical treatment that also softens the paper to get it ready for pulping, and then evaporates it after it leaches it out by flowing over that surface only. It leaches it out and reconstitutes it so it can be reused again, and the paper comes out almost perfect for doing recycling into paper that would be good. What about the plastic recycling for the water bottle here, or Gatorade bottle? Literally cutting off this little extra band here is all you have to do to get this recyclable. Taking off the shrink wrap, labeling, also a good idea. Are they 100% recyclable? Yes. A recycler society is one that either makes things that are durable goods, like all of you complain that we should have been doing since the 1800s, or just keeps recycling its garbage because it's better than refining the oil and digging it up in the first place. There's an entire industry that wants you to not recycle. It has nothing to do with whether it's a good or bad idea, whether it's communist, socialist, or just American. And I want to point out, looking at other countries that do almost but not quite perfect recycling compared to the United States, we do about 50% of the contents actually recycled. Us doing double what we would do if we didn't do recycling isn't a sign we should stop recycling. It just means we need to do better. The all or nothing attitude is often presented as a reason to not do recycling. It's not perfect, so why bother? Fuck all that. We're going to be running out of materials unless you truly believe oil is infinite. It isn't. It's a finite resource. Paper isn't a finite resource. It can actually be regenerated. All of these plastics become an infinite resource if you recycle them. Anybody who sandbags your attempt to recycle stuff in your area isn't trying to prove that it's not working. They need it not to work because they probably are investing in oil companies or some other thing. They'll have ulterior motives and interior decorators. Anyway, that's about it for the subject matter of the day. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And yes, literally, you can make money recycling it. Normally, the plastics in the garbage that you're tossing out are only worth $100 a ton, but you can get 10 times that if you sort it correctly. Maybe we should sort it better. Bye. Good luck. Good riddance.